I was able to lease a $45,000 car for $320 a month with zero down. And I did the exact same thing for an $83,000 car for $645 a month. So in this video, I'm gonna break down how you should lease a car in 2024 and everything that you need to know to get the most bang for your buck. We will cover the current market trends, how to get the best possible deal on your lease, and some common misconceptions that people may have about leasing. But first, let's make sure that we're all on the same page. So, what exactly is a lease and how does it compare to buying a car? A lease is just another way of financing a car. The easiest explanation is that people think of it as kind of like renting a car. Once your agreed terms are up, you have the option to return the car or buy it out at the agreed price when you sign the agreement. So, you're essentially just paying for what you use. No matter how you look at it, driving a car has its associated costs. This can include depreciation, maintenance, fuel or charging, and other miscellaneous expenses that come with driving the car. So leasing a car does not mean that you're just setting your money on fire. On the other hand, when you buy a car, you're just financing it until you have enough equity to show that you own the car. With the average auto loan ranging anywhere between 5 to 6 years, you most likely won't have any equity in the car until after year 3 unless you put money down. Anytime before that, you're just going to be paying off the interest. After you complete the loan, you will just own the car outright. Now that we know what a lease is, let's clear up some of the biggest myths out there. One of the biggest misconceptions about leasing is that people think it's going to be way more expensive than buying a car. Now, it can be, but it really depends on your situation. However, whenever you lease a vehicle, 9 out of 10 times, the monthly payments are gonna be less than when you buy a car with a traditional auto loan. Leases work especially well for business owners because you can write off a percentage of the lease payments based on the amount that you use for business. So if your lease payment is $500 a month and you use it 80% of the time for business, you can write off $400 a month from your taxable income. Another great benefit of leasing is that you can get rebates that are applicable if you were to buy the car. For instance, many manufacturers offer cash rebates for those who choose to lease. Now, you wouldn't be able to get this if you were to buy the car. Buying a car may have different incentives, but if you lease a vehicle, you can lower the price of the car by applying this lease cash. Now, you can still buy the car after your lease, so technically you can apply that lease cash if you still intend to buy. Another thing to keep in mind is maintenance costs. Generally, there really isn't much maintenance to be done in the first couple of years of a new vehicle. You may have to do an oil change here and there, or a maintenance plan is already applied to your lease whenever you sign the deal. Now, if you were to buy a car and drive it for 8 years or more, then it's probably going to be in your best interest to go ahead and just buy the car. Owning a car has its own issues since there are going to be variable costs such as maintenance. But depending on the make and model of the car, you may not have any major issues until much later on. If you are looking for the best way to drive a car for the least amount of cost, it is simply just by buying a used car that's usually around 3 to 5 years old and driving it a few years before selling it. This way, you get a car where most of its depreciation is already taken care of by the previous owners and the maintenance around this age is still pretty minimal. Now, how do you know if you're getting a good deal on your lease? Here are some general rules of thumb when it comes to leases to determine whether or not you have a good deal. The one that's probably most famous is the 1% rule, which means that if your monthly payment is 1% of the MSRP, then you have a unicorn type deal. These are hard to come by, and if you score one of these, then you have an awesome deal on your hands. Now, what I mean by 1% is when you take everything into account, which includes your taxes and any drive-off fees that you have in this payment. Because with enough money down, any car payment can be a 1% lease. Now, if your monthly payment is 1.25% of the MSRP, then you have a great deal. If you have a 1.5% of the MSRP, then you have a pretty good deal. Anything higher than this, then that's something you probably should shy away from. But also keep in mind that not all cars will lease the same way. It is very possible to get two $50,000 cars with two very different payments. Now, if you really want the most bang for your buck, you have to shop the deal, not the car. This could be a hard pill to swallow for anybody who wants a specific car in a specific color and maybe in a specific trim and different packages. But the more specific you are about the car, especially on a lease, the more you are going to pay, and the lease may not be that great of a deal. The key is to have some flexibility. Give yourself some options of some makes and models that you would like and just go from there. For instance, if you're in the market for a Honda CR-V, then you should be open for a Kia Sportage. If you're in the market for a Mercedes-Benz GLE, then you should be open to a BMW X5. Next, let's discuss something that's crucial that can make or break your lease deal: your credit score. When it comes to lease a car, just like anything in life that requires financing, you're gonna get your credit pulled. To get the best possible deal on your lease, you want to have Tier 1 credit, What this means is that once your credit passes a certain threshold, typically between 720 and 740, you'll be placed in a tier that allows you to get the best interest rate. Every financial company will have its own rating system, so obviously the higher your credit score is, the better. This is not to say that you can't lease a vehicle with less than excellent credit, you just won't be able to get the best rates available. Now, let's talk about exactly how you can get the best deal for your next lease. My number one recommendation is to check what deals are being made out there right now to see if your local dealerships can match them. There is no point in reinventing the wheel when it comes to leasing cars. If someone has done it already, then there's a high probability that you can do it too. There's no point into going to a dealership trying to negotiate on your own and dealing with salesmen. Not only that it's going to waste your time, but also going to add to the stress of getting a car. So my recommendation is to head over to the Lease Hacker website to check out the forums. This is an online community that's focused on leasing. They also have their own deals on this website, so that's where I would start off first, just to get a feel of what deals are there to be made right now. You will see community members posting their latest deals, and you also see auto brokers posting their deals. My suggestion is to look at what the current brokers are posting right now compared to what deals people are getting outside of brokers. This is where you can find a middle ground to see if it's worth negotiating a deal for yourself. Out of the 2 leases that I got recently, one of them I went through a broker, and the other one I did myself. If I were to do it again, I honestly would have just gone with the broker for both. The reason being is that the process of leasing a vehicle at a dealership is still going to take you at least 3 hours. For me, when it's all said and done, from the time I entered the dealership to the time I left, it was around 4 hours. You really have to calculate how much your time is worth and whether or not it is worth the hassle and stress of negotiating with a car salesman. Since this is not my first rodeo, I knew what I was getting myself into, and I had a number in my head that I needed to hit before I signed any documents. The car salesman finally agreed to my terms after a lot of back and forth, but even then, the process took a lot of time for them to work the deal through finance, talk to the finance manager, and all of the BS that comes into getting a car. On the other hand, when I went through a car broker, all I had to do was just send the fee to the broker, he sent my information to the dealership, and all I had to do was go to the dealership, sign the paperwork, and I was off. This was honestly the easiest way to lease a car. I'm not sponsored by Lease Hacker, but this place has provided so much value for me, and I know it will help you out there if you are looking for a lease. So this carries on to my next suggestion, which, if you want to get a great deal on a lease, is just to go through a broker. Car brokers or lease brokers are companies usually consisting of former car salesmen that know the game and they already pre-negotiated the lease deals for you. Just like car shopping from dealership to dealership, it is perfectly fine to shop around for brokers. Some have better deals than others, and some may focus on certain makes of cars. One broker may focus on BMWs while the other may just focus on Mercedes. There are also brokers who handles all types of vehicles. It will be wise to check out different brokers to see what numbers you can get. Usually these numbers are not too far apart, so go with whoever has excellent reviews and have been vetted by the community. One thing to know about brokers is that these deals are typically not eligible for further negotiation because the brokers already negotiated these deals with the sales manager at specific car dealerships. Auto brokers make money by you paying them a fee, or they just get a small cut from the sale of the dealership that does the deal. They usually charge the fee up front, and it's usually between $400 to $600, so depending on what your time is worth, this definitely can be worthwhile. The main reason why I didn't go through a lease broker for my recent Mercedes is that I couldn't get a hold of anyone on the weekend, and I wanted to see if I could get a dealership to match my deal. I was able to get them to do it, but it took a lot of work and time out of my day just to make it happen. So looking back on it, I probably would have just gone through a broker, gone through the dealership, signed the paperwork, and just driven home. Now, which cars should you lease to get the best deals? There are plenty of options no matter what your budget is. If you want something more economical, I suggest looking at Kia, Hyundai, or Nissan. If you want a Honda or Toyota, I wouldn't suggest leasing those since lease deals on these car brands are usually rare, and I really don't think it's worthwhile compared to just buying these cars. For luxury cars, brands that have been leasing well are Mercedes, BMW, and Audi, which are the big 3 of luxury cars. If you're in the market for a Porsche, these leases are rare. You may be able to find deals on their EVs such as a Taycan or even a Macan, but aside from their flagship models like the Cayennes and 911s, it's really hard to find a great deal. So just keep in mind that not all cars lease well, so you gotta be open to some cross-shopping. So here's leasing in a nutshell. You want to find a car that can be discounted and has a high residual value, which will minimize your lease payment. For example, if a car costs $40,000 and you reduce it to $35,000, and this car has a 3-year, 36,000 mile residual value of $25,000, over the next 3 years, you're essentially paying $10,000. Of course, this is just simple terms. I'm not factoring into tax or any of the fees that come with getting a new vehicle. But in layman's terms, that is essentially what you're paying. Now, let's just say the same $40,000 car and you're not able to negotiate the price, but you still have a residual value of $25,000. Over the course of 3 years, you will be paying $15,000, which is significantly higher. So my recommendation is to look through the lease hacker forums to see what deals are being made right now and what deals are currently listed on their website. This way, you know which car to target. There has been a growing trend of EVs with insane deals. This is essentially how I was able to get a $45,000 Hyundai for only $320 a month, including tax. Hyundais and Kias are essentially giving away their EVs because of these insane cash rebates. You can also get an EV federal tax rebate that automatically applies to the lease. Now, when you buy an EV, you have to jump through a lot more hoops to get this tax rebate, but when you lease it, it is much easier because typically that rebate goes to the leasing company and it automatically applies to your lease, which will lower your lease payment. This was a key reason on why I leased 2 EVs. So if you're in the market for an EV or considering one, there's no better time than now since the federal tax credit is such a great perk to take advantage of. Also, there's been a lot of car makers offering free charging on a specific network for a certain amount of time. For both of the cars I recently leased, I got 2 years of charging up to 30 minutes on the Electrify America network. I honestly don't see myself only using free charging for my vehicles, but I think it is a nice perk to have if there's one near you or if you're going on trips. Another reason on why leasing may work better on EVs is that due to the technological nature of these vehicles, depreciation have been crushing some of these cars. So if you are interested in EVs, but you want to play a little bit safer and don't know how the values of your car will be in the next couple of years, then you should lease. Because if the value of your car is lower than the buyout price, you can simply just return your car and save yourself from that loss. Now let's talk about zero down car leases and how they actually work. You probably see this advertised at every single major car dealership near you, but I need to explain what zero down actually means. There's usually 2 meanings for this. It's either zero down payment or zero due at signing. Whenever you lease a vehicle, you typically have to pay at least the first month's payment, license and registration fees, upfront taxes, and documentation fees. This is usually standard even when you buy a new car. So depending on the car that you're looking to lease, this can range from a couple of $100s to a few thousand of dollars when you sign for your lease. On the other hand, when you get a lease with a zero due at signing, this is a type of lease that's known as a true sign and drive lease. This means that all of your fees, taxes, and your first month's payments are rolled into the lease. So this is my preferred method of leasing since I do like to put as little money out of pocket as possible when it comes to a lease, but it is definitely up to you. Sometimes these fees are unavoidable. Just keep in mind that if you were to go for a zero due at signing lease, the amount of money that you would have to pay upfront is essentially being financed as well. This can make your lease a little bit more expensive, so it's really up to you whether or not it is worth the savings. Now, before you actually get your first lease and get excited about finding a great deal with a low monthly payment, check out the current car insurance rates for that specific car. Normally with leases, these will require you to get a certain amount of coverage, usually full coverage. I highly recommend just giving your insurance company a call just to see what are the rates right now. Newer cars generally will cost more to insure, so if you're in the market for an EV or a luxury car, those tend to be higher as well. This is something to keep in mind before signing that lease because insurance can be a big component of your overall driving costs. Now, this vehicle is about how you can score the best lease deal, but if you're still convinced that you want to do it yourself to even get a better deal than what a broker can give you, then watch this videos over here where I go over the specifics of what goes into a lease rather than just the general terms. I'll see you over there.